This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. A new report says if women farmers had the same rights as men, more could be done to reduce world hunger. The report, Empowering Women in Agriculture, is from the anti-hunger group Bread for the World. Bread for the World says equal access to agricultural resources would help increase food security and economic growth. Faustine Wabwiri is the group's foreign assistance specialist. She says women constitute half of the agricultural labor force in not just Africa, but the developing countries as a whole. And when you think of Africa alone, she says, it's more than 60% of the total agricultural labor force being provided by women. The report says in most countries, women working in rural areas are more likely than men to hold seasonal, part-time, and low-wage jobs. They also receive less pay for the same work. Ms. Wabwiri says women farmers often cannot get seeds, fertilizer, proper tools, credit, and especially land. She says in most of Africa, about 80% of the population is living in rural areas, and they subsist on agriculture. Women make up 60% of the agricultural labor force, and yet they lack access to resources, she says. She says land is one good example. Less than 20% of all landholders are women. This is often because of legal as well as cultural reasons. She says women who have lost their husbands may have no legal rights over their land. The only way to keep the land, she says, is to marry, say, the brother of the dead husband. Restrictions like these, she says, continue to impede women's ability to fully enjoy their human rights. However, Ms. Wabwiri says women in agriculture are getting more attention these days. For example, Kenya's new constitution gives women the right to own land. But she says there is still a long way to go. Bread for the World is urging the United States government to increase development assistance, or at least not to decrease it. She says Feed the Future, the U.S. government's agriculture aid program, is helping to elevate the status of women. But Ms. Wabwiri says more African governments must recognize the major role that women play in agriculture and elsewhere. Just how much could hunger be reduced if women had equal access to agricultural resources? The report estimates that hunger could be reduced for an extra 100 to 150 million people. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Chicken feathers are useful, and not just to a chicken. Some go into pillows, coats, and other products. But countless chicken feathers go to waste. In the United States, billions of chickens are produced yearly. Most of their feathers are thrown away. But instead of being buried in landfills, some feathers could find a future in plastics. Scientists in the Washington area have been working with keratin, the main substance in poultry feathers. One of the products they have developed is a flower pot. It may look like other flower pots, but the container breaks down in the earth within 1 to 5 years. And as it breaks down, it naturally releases nitrogen into the soil. The flower pots are made by reducing chicken feathers to a powder. Then, the powder is formed into pellets and shaped into pots. The environmentally friendly flower pot is the work of two researchers. Walter Schmidt is with the Agricultural Research Service, part of the United States Agriculture Department. Masoud Huda is with the Horticultural Research Institute, a private organization. The Institute's research director, Mark Tefo, says the flower pot works well for vegetables and small flowering plants like geraniums and impatiens. Walter Schmidt has been working to find uses for chicken feathers since the 1990s. Progress in 2002 showed that plastic made from feathers could be formed like other plastics. He says feathers are much stronger and last longer than another plant material, cellulose. He says feathers are about 8 times as strong as cellulose. He points out that traditional flower pots made from petroleum-based plastics can last much longer, but he wonders if there is really a need. He says most flower pots are never reused. He says, why would you want a plastic that you use for a year to last for 200 years? It makes no sense. You want to match the product with the use. Walter Schmidt and Masoud Huda are now adding another chicken product to their flower pots, chicken waste. The waste will add more nutrients to the soil as the pot breaks down. The scientists say they hope their flower pot will be on the market in a year or two. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. You can find transcripts, MP3s, podcasts, and archives of our reports at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. In 2008, scientists reported on a study of cotton grown in 6 provinces in northern China. The study involved bollworms, a major threat to cotton farmers. It also involved Bt cotton, a plant genetically engineered to resist that threat. Bt cotton plants naturally kill bollworms. As a result, the study in China found that the cotton plants could also help protect nearby crops against damage by the insects. Now, several researchers involved in that study have published another report in the same journal, Science. They studied the same farmlands again and confirmed the findings about bollworms. But they also found something else. They say another kind of bug is now attacking the cotton and other crops. The study reported on mirid populations between 1997 and 2008. The researchers also documented the use of insecticide chemicals by the Chinese farmers from 1992 to 2008. Kongming Wu of the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences in Beijing took part in both studies. He says mirids are destroying crops, including cotton, apples, pears, peaches, and vegetables. He says this is happening where mirids never before were a problem. The report says the bugs invaded after farmers decreased their use of insecticides by planting Bt cotton. The scientists say their research shows that the Bt cotton has become a source of mirids. They say the population increases are related to drops in insecticide use on the cotton crop. The genetically engineered cotton is designed to help farmers save money by decreasing the need for poisons. But the scientists say the Chinese farmers have now had to use more insecticides to fight the mirids. Bt is a bacterium that was discovered in the early 20th century. Farmers started using it as a natural way to kill insects. Then scientists learned how to put a Bt gene into cotton plants. Much of the cotton grown in northern China is a Bt variety made by Monsanto. Different companies produce Bt cotton. Around the world, farmers grow an estimated 16 million hectares of Bt cotton. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Tell us about a time when you have tried to solve one problem but unexpectedly produced another. Share your comments at voaspecialenglish.com or on our Facebook page at VOA Learning English.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. To walk the talk means to keep your promises, to do what you said you would do. Walk the Talk is also the name of a new report by the International Food Policy Research Institute. The group says there has been a lot of talk about fighting hunger, but not enough action. As a result, it says the international community could fall far short of the goal of cutting the number of hungry people in half by 2015. The report says an estimated 870 million people were hungry last year. 2 billion did not get enough micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. Shagan Fan is the Institute's Director General. He described 2012 as a mixed year for progress against hunger. He says African countries, India, China, and Brazil continue to invest in agriculture. Donor agencies, he says, including the World Bank and USAID, have also increased their investment in food security and nutrition. But he says a lack of political will limited progress on food security. After the food crisis in 2008 and 2009, many promises were made to increase investment in smallholder agriculture. These small farms are often headed by women. Shagan Fan says not all those promises have been kept. Supporters of greater agricultural investment in poor countries have often criticized farm support programs in rich nations. They say subsidies hurt food production and sales in developing countries. Now, many countries, including India and China, are also turning to subsidies. Shagan Fan says that needs to change. He says it's time the international community walked the talk on food security. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. An international group has set the limit for the 2011 catch of bluefin tuna in the eastern Atlantic and Mediterranean Sea. The limit is just under 13,000 metric tons. That is 600 tons less than the 2010 quota, a reduction of 4%. Conservation groups criticized the move, saying the cut is not big enough to support the recovery of bluefin tuna in the Mediterranean. The International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas set the catch in November in Paris. Delegates to the commission represent the governments of 48 fishing nations. In 2006, the commission established a plan to stop overfishing. The goal is to rebuild bluefin populations in the eastern Atlantic and the Mediterranean by 2022. The European Commission had called for reducing the catch in 2011 to 6,000 tons to improve the chances for the huge and highly valuable fish. But Mediterranean members of the European Union rejected that proposal even before the 10-day meeting began. Still, EU Fisheries Commissioner Maria Damanaki said the meeting took a step in the right direction for sustainable management of bluefin tuna. The fishing industry wanted to keep the existing catch limit. Atlantic bluefin can grow 3 meters long and weigh as much as 650 kilograms. France, Italy, and Spain catch most of the Atlantic bluefin eaten in the world. Most of the catch goes to Japan. Japan called for stronger action against illegal fishing and underreporting of bluefin catches. Conservation activists say the eastern Atlantic has only about 1/4 as many bluefin tuna as it did in the 1950s. And the population in the western Atlantic has dropped by more than 80% since 1970. Environmental groups say illegal fishing and underreporting might mean there are even fewer bluefin than estimates suggest. The Center for Biological Diversity, an activist group, recently launched a boycott of the prized fish. It says thousands of people around the world have signed a promise not to eat bluefin tuna or spend money at sushi restaurants that still serve it. Susan Lieberman of the Pew Environment Group in Washington says people should care what happens to fish that are important to the environment of the sea. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Afghan farmers are expecting another big harvest this year, but officials at the United Nations and around the world see no reason to celebrate. The crop is opium. Farmers have been busy harvesting their opium poppies. One farmer in Helmand province says wheat and corn bring too little income. He says people in Helmand cannot feed themselves by growing food crops. A report by the UN Office on Drugs and Crime warns that Afghanistan could supply as much as 90% of the world's heroin. The report says opium production is especially high in the most unstable areas of Afghanistan. These are areas where the surge increase in American troops helped beat back Taliban influence. The report says insurgents used the insecurity in areas like Helmand and Kandahar province as a chance to win popular support. They also assisted opium farmers with their crops. The UN says poor weather and crop disease led to a reduction in the supply of opium last year, which drove up prices. The higher price of opium makes more farmers want to grow poppies. The UN says this is the third year in a row that opium poppy growing has increased in Afghanistan. A UN special advisor on drug issues says the huge opium crop is a sign of failure. He adds that while farmers are dependent on the income from opium, 1 million people in the country are addicted to the drug. The increase in production follows gains made by the government during years of effort to reduce the drug trade. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Climate researchers met recently in Cameroon to talk about threats to Africa's land and animals. They said they believe the continent may lose as much as 30% of its animal and plant species by the end of this century. They blame the losses on the warming of the earth, population growth, and unrestricted development. The researchers represent 20 African, American, and European universities. They say countries south of the Sahara Desert are losing forest faster than any place on Earth. Wood companies are cutting down trees to meet growing demand from China, Europe, and the United States. The population is growing 3% each year. There are now homes, factories, and farms on land that once was forest. Many African animals and plants no longer have a place to live as a result. Climate change also continues to threaten species. Thomas Smith is with the University of California. He says Africa may lose 40% of its mammal species because of expected rises in temperatures. The African chimpanzee is among the mammals at risk. Mary Catherine Gonder is a professor at Drexel University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She studies chimpanzees in the Congo Basin. She says their forest home is disappearing. She also says hunters continue to kill the animals to sell as food. The researchers say it is important to develop environmentally friendly economies. The Congo Basin area of Western and Central Africa has the second largest equatorial rainforest in the world. It is important to the lives of millions of people. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. A movie from Cameroon called The Big Banana has come to the United States. It looks at issues with the banana industry, like disputed land rights, food insecurity, and pollution. One Cameroonian woman in the film says the land belongs to local villagers, and they are asking operators of banana plantations to give it back. Frank Ameni Bialu directed the documentary film. He says officials prevented a showing in Yaoundé, the capital. He says making the movie was difficult and even led to his brief detention. I got arrested because the chief of that part of the village did not want me to film because he is being paid by the banana company. You understand, the thing is, everything around that area is controlled by the company. If you look at the congressman of the region, he is also the director of public relations of the company. The Minister of Trade of Cameroon is also president of the board of directors of the company. The company, Plantation du Haut-Panja, is French and American owned. Representatives would not talk to the filmmakers. The company and Cameroonian officials did not answer a request for a VOA interview. Mr. Bialu says large parts of fertile land in Cameroon are being used for banana exports. As a result, local residents have more and more difficulty growing their own food or finding food to buy. Also, the use of pesticide chemicals is blamed for polluting water and causing health problems. Villagers accuse the company of destroying their fields to expand the banana plantations after getting land leases from the government. Mr. Bialu says the problem exists across Africa as foreigners increasingly invest in agricultural land. He says government corruption is stronger than the people's traditional rights to the land. When a company arrives and just shows the money, the big cash, what happens is the government just gives them the land that they want, and these people cannot defend themselves because they do not have any rights on that land. Amira Woods, from the American-based Institute for Policy Studies, helped organize the showing of The Big Banana. She says, because of threats from multinational corporations, from sovereign wealth funds, whether it is Saudi Arabia or Iran, the list is actually growing of countries that are looking to Africa as a source of access to land when arable land is becoming much more scarce on this planet. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Teff is a common part of the diet in Ethiopia and other parts of Africa. This nutritious grain is very small. It has a mild, nutty taste. People use teff flour to make bread and other foods. Now, teff is finding new uses in foods for people with celiac disease. People with celiac disease cannot process gluten. Gluten is a protein in wheat, rye, and barley. Glutens can be found not just in foods, but also medicines and other products. The immune system is supposed to protect the body, but celiac causes the immune system to damage the small intestine. The disease can cause stomach pains, bloating, and diarrhea. It can also cause weight loss and make people feel continually hungry. It interferes with the body's ability to absorb nutrients from food. In the past, celiac disease was considered rare and limited mostly to people of European ancestry. The rate of reported cases was 1 in 10,000 people. Today, the estimate is about 1 in 133 Americans. But celiac researcher Alessio Fasano says until recent years, not much was known about the disease. Dr. Fasano says studies show that the disease affects about the same percentage of the general public worldwide. That is about 1%. So it is not rare at all. Dr. Fasano directs the Center for Celiac Research at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. He says the disease can be very mild, but more serious cases can interfere with a child's growth. Adults can suffer liver damage, joint pain, and other problems. The main way to control the disease is to avoid glutens. There is a growing market for products that are gluten-free. Farmers in Nevada grow about half the teff produced in the United States. The crop is currently worth only about $1 million to farmers in that state. But teff grower David Eckert is hopeful. He says the market for gluten-free foods is going to be big. Some people without celiac disease say they feel better when they avoid gluten. But many scientists question if this is really true. 7 years ago, Anna Quigg was surprised to learn that she has celiac disease. She says gluten-free products are much easier to find these days. She buys teff and other whole grains. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Transcripts and MP3s of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. 20 years ago, when the Soviet Union collapsed, so did beef production in Russia. Breeding and management programs for beef cattle fell apart. Today, Russia imports much of its beef. Cattle are raised mostly for dairy. Instead of beef, Russians have expanded poultry and pork operations. These are faster and less costly to start. But there is some new investment in beef production. And one of those involved is an American rancher and cowboy named Darrell Stevenson. He sees plenty of room for growth. Russia's beef herd is less than 1% the size of the American herd. He says there is tremendous opportunity in Russia in terms of resources and available ground. In late 2010, Darrell Stevenson began sending cows, bulls, horses, and equipment to Russia. He sent more than 1,400 animals. About a third of them traveled by ship. The others came by plane. Mr. Stevenson has 2 Russian partners in what they call the Stevenson-Sputnik ranch. The ranch is located on almost 6,000 hectares of land in Voronezh, in the Black Earth area of southern Russia. The Angus and Hereford cattle came from ranchers in his home state of Montana. The imported cows have given birth to their first calves. He says, "We are helping establish a local beef herd, a regional beef herd, and eventually a national beef herd." Yekaterina Zumina grew up in St. Petersburg and trained as a veterinarian. She worked last year on Daryl Stevenson's ranch in Montana to learn American methods. She says Russians have a lot of experience with dairy cows in barns, but not with beef cattle on open rangeland. She says it is really, really hard to find good enough people in Russia that can work with beef cattle, because Russia is world known as dairy country. We have lots of dairy herds, dairy cows, but managing dairy and beef cows is a totally different thing. Daryl Stevenson is not the only American involved in projects to build a high-quality beef herd in Russia. Reaching that goal will take time and a lot more cows. But Ms. Zumina says the ranch in Voronezh can help show Russians that cowboys really exist. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Persutti. You can download MP3s of our stories and do English teaching activities at voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. People who do not get enough vitamin A in their diet may develop night blindness. But in the developing world, a lack of vitamin A causes much more serious harm to children. The World Health Organization links vitamin A deficiency to as many as 250,000 child deaths every year. One excellent source of vitamin A is found in sweet potatoes with orange flesh. Orange sweet potatoes contain high levels of beta-carotene, which the body changes into vitamin A. Experts say orange sweet potatoes, specially bred for growing conditions in Africa, could help solve the lack of vitamin A there. But first, more people will need to be persuaded to eat them. Jan Lowe, with the International Potato Center, a research organization, says the sweet potato needs a better image in Africa. She said, "We do have an image problem with sweet potato in general in sub-Saharan Africa. It is seen as a crop of the poor." Ms. Lowe explains that sweet potatoes are mainly grown by poor women to feed their families in case another crop fails. The sweet potatoes commonly grown in Africa have white or yellow flesh, but they are low in vitamin A. Jan Lowe took part in a project to study how best to market orange sweet potatoes to Africans. She worked on an information campaign in Mozambique and Uganda. The campaign included radio messages about the nutritional benefits of the orange sweet potato. They advertised its ability to fight diseases, make you strong, clear your skin, and make you look healthy. In areas without radio, the campaigners spread the message through community theater. The performances included singing, dancing, and storytelling. And everywhere they went, the campaigners wore orange t-shirts and hats. They even drove orange vehicles. Jan Lowe says the color of the tuber made it easier to gain public attention. Dan Gustafson heads the Washington office of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. He points to efforts in the past to increase the popularity of other nutritious crops. He says most of these efforts failed because organizers of the campaigns did not consider what people wanted to eat. But Mr. Gustafson sees a better chance for the efforts to increase the popularity of the orange sweet potato in Africa. For one thing, except for the color, the vegetable is similar to what people already use. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.